for VCTV. Welcome back to another exciting episode, and in some cases, to the next frontier for all of my Trekkie fans out there. Today, we are talking about something incredible, something that we have been talking about since the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, in science fiction, in reality, everything in between. But it is now something that is here and here to be paying attention to. That is space and deep technologies. Every episode here on VCTV, we talk about various technologies and industries and how they are affecting each other, along with investing in those industries. What opportunities, what trends, and what you can do to be successful in each of those. And we wanted to come back to deep technologies. And deep technologies, when we talk about that today, and our panelists will go further in explaining it, but what I want to set the stage with is we're talking about these technologies not necessarily focused on end users, the customers. Instead, they help power or empower the various devices, software, and our everyday lives. We're talking about artificial intelligence, which we spoke a little bit about yesterday. We're talking about robotics. We're talking about advanced material sciences. So even getting into the details of 3D printing to biotech, other topics we've covered, and one of my personal favorites, blockchain, but not to be forgotten, quantum computing. So a lot of these may be buzzwords you've heard in and around the news, but today we're actually going to go and unpack those and go one step further to space. Space exploration is not just about going to space and space travel, but we actually want to look at how the space industry is moving and shifting and where the opportunities are. Right now, according to Forbes Business Insights, who just released a report yesterday, the space launch industry itself is expected to be almost $32 billion by 2026. We've talked again a lot about these different industries and technologies and how they are going to be bigger and bigger coming towards that 2025 and 26 year. So we want to get you ready. So we brought on some of the brightest and some of the best in the industry that are making investments in all of these areas to share with you what's happening to get you prepared. But before we start, thank you for joining in as always. If you have comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the box as we are live. I'll do my best to ask them in real time. If not, we're all available, as you'll find out, on social media, and we'll do our best to follow up with you afterwards. If you like what you hear, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and also a shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making VCTV possible and bringing us all together into your screen to share all we're going to today. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our guests who are going to be the experts talking and sharing about this. And without further ado, Irina, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to have you. If you could, just an introduction on yourself and a little background.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to be back. We got to touch on space a little bit in our past conversation, so I've been really looking forward to it. I'm founder of Lumeri. It's my new company. Its goal is to connect investors and projects and really make sure that space as an asset class becomes a reality. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm a founding advisor of a global securities exchange. I'm an advisor on Space Fund, ProChain Capital. It's a hedge fund from New York. And I'm founder of Blockchain Cubed. It's a financial technology consulting firm. I've been in payments and financial technology for 15 years. I'm driven by innovation and really kind of a global capital markets and innovation in capital markets is what drives me. And why space? Because for global capital markets, we need to create real true global capital markets. We must have something that is a golden key. And I believe that space as an asset class is that golden key. So I'm driven of bringing that innovation into hands of people.
Absolutely. And it's no longer just one country versus another, the ultimate, or as we know, the historical space race. It's now something that everybody, both public and private market, can get into as well, which is exciting to dive into. And I'm I am very energetic to hear more of your thoughts in this area. And on the blockchain note, for those that haven't heard, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, Coinbase just announced the idea of going public and becoming a publicly listed company today. So big news that made waves in the blockchain and cryptocurrency or digital currency markets as well. So we'll come back to that and other things. But Gary, my man, the AI guru of the world, back on the show 2 days in a row, ladies and gentlemen, paying attention and keeping track at home. We've brought him back. He got everything when it comes to artificial intelligence, told us everything about future of smart homes yesterday and smart assistants. But Gary, welcome back to the show. I don't want to steal any more of your thunder. Little introduction and a little background on you as well.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Gary Fowler. I've done 15 companies. My most successful exit, I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold for $1.35 billion 7 months ago. I'm passionate about artificial intelligence, as you know, Kyle. I've started a company 4 years ago, Eva, which is one of the top 10 HRAI companies in the world, with a guy by the name of David Yang out of Russia. It's in Silicon Valley. So I'm passionate. I love it. I mean, if we look at it, we talk about space. There are 40 billion Earth-like planets in a Goldilocks zone, and the closest one is 12 light years away. So how do we get there? And I'll talk about that a bit longer. So I'm very intrigued, because the same technologies we talked about yesterday with the home are some of the same technologies that we're going to need to have a HAL in space.
And if you didn't tune in, definitely check that episode out after today. And HAL, 2001 Space Odyssey. We also talked a little bit about Jarvis, Iron Man. These things are actually in place. And Gary, I won't steal his thunder, but he's got some examples. Let me just put it that way. Noble, welcome back to the show as well. Excited to have you. You've got a whole new mic set up. This is
hopefully you can hear me better, Kyle. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. It's perfect. Intro and a little background on yourself, my friend.
My name is Noble Dracone. I'm the founder and managing partner of Dracone Capital Partners. And prior to that, I ran a $30 million hedge fund in the commodities space. I constantly been doing consulting. Now I'm teamed up with MAccelerator.LA. We have a MAccelerator fund, Venture Fund 1, that we're raising $15 million from accredited investors. And after that, we're going to institutional and family offices for the additional $25 million. When this popped up about talking about space and venture fund and what it looks like for the future, and I'm happy to see Gary here, brilliant as always. It's something that I've been near and dear to my heart. For one of the early companies that I invested in, worked with Ad Astra, and I don't know if you know the International Space Society, the National Space Association, but we've been actually working with them for quite some time. We've actually put out their magazine. We've gone to a lot of their futurist conferences, met Buzz Aldrin, everybody. So the feeling of where things are going to go in that community has been a constant fight between not only the stars, but inhabiting our local solar system. Are we going to the moon, or are we going to Mars? And I think that that's really the key. And I believe a lot of the technology and the drive of really focusing on near space is really the key, and tapping into creating our first off-world site, and that's the moon. And I think that so I think there's a lot of technologies and a lot of opportunities there. Our fund focuses primarily on augmented reality and virtual reality technology, as well as multimedia and fintech. But I believe that there's an intersection between, you mentioned Jarvis and you mentioned, how I think there's an interface between what true interstellar spaceflight looks like. I think will be more akin to something like Avatar, as opposed to actually going there physically, in which we will run and operate both machines and simulacra and literally avatars on off-world sites. And that's the only way these intergenerational moves will go. Gary brought it up. There's 40,000 Goldilocks planets. The reality is that we have a lot of the technology to get us there, and a lot of nascent technology between lenders and et cetera. So it is an exciting opportunity, but I do believe that augmented reality and virtual reality, or XR, extended reality, plays a key part in making that a true fruition for human beings, because the human vessel is just too fragile, I believe, for space.
Absolutely. I'm speechless because it is so exciting, and I'm trying not to nerd out with you. But, to your point, I think that, go big or go home. But at the same time, a lot of the technologies that we have, to previous episodes, these things have been accelerated. They have been advanced. In some cases, what we're going to be talking about today, further beyond space, deep technologies are more advanced than we'll give them credit for, or will be in the coming years as things are continuing to accelerate. So a lot of those technologies can be applied to the stars and to other things that we're looking at doing, helping us go beyond this beautiful blue world that we currently live in today, and see what's next. And with that, Wally, my dear friend, welcome as well back, or welcome to the show for the first time. It's a pleasure to have you. And I know you focus a lot on not just space, but deep technologies like quantum and edge and some of those areas you and I have had conversations with. Quick introduction and also a little background on yourself as well.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Kyle, for having me. So first time here. So my name is Wally Wang. I'm currently managing a macro VC called Scale Asia Ventures. Basically, from the LP side is actually pretty interesting, is Asian American, and also from strategic corporates in Asia. So it's actually a pretty smart money, trying to put a little bit in the early stage and trying to scale the company together for the following rounds. So my focus right now is on the, most of them are in the deep tech. I don't have much experience in the space, but in deep tech, I specifically focus on biotech and medtech. So that's drug discovery using AI and those new diagnostic tools. And like Kyle mentioned, I also look at the extension of the cloud, like the edge computing, where like the cybersecurity and DevOps tools are taking more basically important roles in exploring those new like edge computing scenarios. And I've also focused on pretty much everything related to AI. So I have a lot of common interests shared with Gary. So looking forward to a very interesting discussion. Prior to becoming an investor, I primarily focused on the enterprise operating side. So I was heading a few Silicon Valley startups to expand to Asia, running their Asia business. So expanding, setting off offices in Singapore, China, Southeast Asia, and also South Korea. In vertical, and quite a few vertical industries, including financial services, insurance, and internet in general. So, yeah, my academic background is actually in the data mining and machine learning. So I was doing my PhD at Stern Business School in New York. So it's a great honor to witness the whole world is becoming digitalized and also becoming more intelligent by leveraging those new techs happening in the past decade.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Excited to have you. This is going to be a fun episode for our audience. Get ready. All right. So without further ado, let's kick off with our very first question. I think really just to kind of set the stage is what's happening in these industries, right? So what's happening when it comes to space? Where are we when it comes to deep technologies? There's so much shifting and changing and rapidly happening, to Wally's point around the digitization of so many businesses, of so many industries, that now things that we call deep tech, so again, blockchain, artificial intelligence, computing, whether that at the edge or quantum, et cetera, they're all now starting to play a role. They matter. They're not just a part of the conversation, they're actually a part of the business. They're a part of the plan. But to each of you, what are the current states of some of these areas respectfully? And we can start with space, or you can start with the broader picture of deep tech. And Irina, let's come to you first. Where are we when it comes to these tech? And I'll let you kind of lead that as you will.
Well, let's touch up on the blockchain first, since it's much easier subject than space, which is really interesting because it was not a case only a couple of years ago. We're really seeing huge adoption, and adoption really in acceptance of governments as well. And I think that's really important pivots and kind of a, when we think about blockchain technology, only 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, it was questionable whether Bitcoin is going to be legal or not, right? So when you were going and raising money, if you were a blockchain company, for the most part, investors were asking that question. Now it's not a question. It's very well understood. And most importantly, regulators starting to understand that there are benefits for implementation of this technology. And I think that's a very big leap, because when we see regulators accepting this, and when we see regulators for capital markets starting to understand that it is something that can save money, that can be transparent, that can actually allow them to do their work better, I think that kind of allows us to have a next big leap. And it's happening all over the world. And I think that that's very important. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I would like everybody to carry out, is understanding that it is becoming well understood. People are not scared about it. And they understand that there is a technology, that it's not only the currency, which was kind of the use case only a couple years ago. Right. So now we have a huge rush of corporations trying to adopt it and seeing who is going to benefit from it. Obviously, there's a lot to go more forward, but we are implementing this technology now.
Well, I think we talked on our last show as well. The Deloitte did a survey recently, their global blockchain survey, for the third year in a row. So 2018, 2019, 2020. And this year they saw, I believe it was over 40%. I'll get the exact number for our audience later, but just over 40% of corporations saying this is a must. Like, absolutely, it's already in our implementation stack. We're already moving forward with it. Whereas a high percentage, so above 60%, we'll just leave it at that, said this is absolutely something we have to consider. And it's something we're planning for. How and what, we're still figuring that out, which is okay. Blockchain, as with other of these technologies we're going to be talking about, may not always be a fit, right? AI may be a better fit for you, and others as well. But the point is, to Irina, what you're saying is, you're right. Adoption is there, and it's not just 2018. Let's talk about it. Let's put out a press release. It's not 2019 of like, hey, let's just pilot things. It's no, this is here. In most cases, you'll never know. Yeah. Exactly.
Actual implementation. Yes. And it's important to understand that a lot of companies are already benefiting from it as well. So it's not kind of it's no longer a marketing tool for fundraising, if you would, as it was before, but actually solutions. And one important thing to understand when it comes to blockchain, we do have permissioned and permissionless technologies. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of enterprises are using permissioned technology already, right? Because it really goes very well with their business spaces. And permissioned blockchains are doing very well. There's a huge integration between space and blockchain as well. Obviously, supply chain is extremely important. Understanding where your minerals come from to the parts is crucial. Rockets are expensive, and failure in rockets is extremely expensive as well. So we're seeing a lot of kind of implementation in that area. It's still not very cost effective. So it's not something that saves companies money, but they're still using it. Another thing that is used in the space and what is needed is payments in space, because what is happening is that there are a lot of companies that are kind of doing servicing in space, and they need to be able to exchange the value, right? And so kind of a payment system is something that is much needed. Now I would like to go to space industry and what kind of happening in space. I would like to mention that one of the problems, and I want to go with the problems because I really want people to understand this, that launching platforms are overfunded and we don't need that many launching platforms. So if you're an entrepreneur, do not go and build another launching platform, but see how you can create a company that can provide servicing in space, right? You can, we have enough funding in that. And Megan Crawford, managing partner of Space Fund, wrote a great article about that. And in the space industry, it is actually feared that it is overinflated, and then it kind of can pop as a bubble. And people are concerned that there's overfunding in the launch and underfunding in other companies. On a good note, we're starting to see a real ecosystem. We're starting to see creation of space as an asset class. Almost every day, I see yet another fund investing in early stage to mid stage companies. And it is extremely important because the way the industry worked before was really kind of a early stage bootstrap, get the grants, and start working with NASA or other big companies. And it is a problem. In order for us to drive innovation, we must make sure that there is an infrastructure, financial infrastructure, to allow these companies to go from early stage to mid stage to public as well. And so that's what my company is concentrating in. And I just am so grateful to see that there's so many people are opening their minds to the opportunities that are there, and pivoting and starting to consider investing in A round, B round, C round companies, and as well as accelerators. We see a number of great accelerators deploying great space companies and leading these companies to seed round and nucleating them. And that is empowering to me.
I love it, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, especially on the blockchain side, I think you're spot on, and with space, you're right. And I'll for the audience, I'll grab Megan's article and share it with everybody in the show notes afterwards. But you're absolutely right. We're starting to see that ecosystem. I mean, Blockstream put satellites to put blockchain nodes up into space, right? We saw the launch of Starlink, which we're going to come back to, and a few other areas and advancements in the recent months. But Noble, I saw you unmuted at one point, so I want to come to you next. Where are you seeing as the current state of things around space in general? Are we going to the stars and beyond, or are we still here for a little bit?
You know, Irina really touched on something, and I really like what she was talking about, because we do fintech, right? And so we're in, and I think blockchain is kind of like, because we're so used to using that word, it's become ubiquitous, but I also think it takes away from the fact that it's just distributed ledger technology. And the core basis of the DLT, you know, like, so my background, 26 years, I was a trader. So the core benefit of the DLT is a constant record spread out over literally a global neural network. And that's really always kind of the part that's forgotten about the beauty of what we created. We created a global supercomputer that allows us to do holographic slices of information divided among everywhere. And it's one of the things that when people were focusing on the byproduct, which is whether it spits off Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever the case may be, they're missing the fact that we've harnessed a global computing system literally within the last decade, and it's been an amazing tool. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys remember when SETI was utilizing background information inside of computers in order to search and scan through star data. And here we have a global DLT that allows us not only to do that, but compute and process a lot more information. So I think that the DLT that and the multiple computer nodes that we have across, whether it's Ethereum or blockchain or Lightchain or however people are using it, it allows us to do background computing in a way that we've never done before. And I think that we've just really scratched the surface of what the DLT does. And when you start harnessing that ability and you integrate the concepts of AI and processing all that data, we've created such a magnificent global network to really drive forward almost any innovation, because the computing power doesn't have to just sit in large box rooms like IBM used to have, right? Where you need, tens of thousands of square footage and tens of thousands of fans and cooling systems in order to drive the ability for the computing and processing power. I'm sure Wally's going to start digging deeper into the deep tech, but the reality is, all this is a convergence, as we always talk about, of the singularity. We have quantum processing literally here. It's been tested. And you combine all of these layers together, we have a real benefit of what the future may hold. As we it has always been the question of how do you get people to adopt it. And payment systems, I think, are the most basis form of it. I don't think that that's really what it was designed for. It's capable of doing it. I think that's the least important component of how the DLT functions and operates. But as you leap forward, there's the same thing in space. I think that this idea of commercialization of space misses kind of the forest for the trees. There's a great article that came out, and I'm getting old, I guess, because I don't remember all the titles and names of everybody. There's a great article that came out, and is by, give me a second, let's make sure I want to do the proper citation so you can add it, by Paul Sutter. And Paul Sutter is talking about the need to bring a particle collider to the moon. And I think that a lot of innovation starts with us looking at the practical applications of what space can do for us beyond the commercialization. So one of the ideas, one of the reasons why they're thinking about going to the moon to build this particle collider is threefold, right? Domestically, a particle collider needs to have air removed, and there's no atmosphere on the moon. You need to keep super cool temperatures for it to operate. The moon is already operating sub-zero. And at the end of the day, because you can deliver information back to Earth, because one side is space, you can consistently do two things. Number one, they talk about providing neutrino energy back to the Earth, almost as a broadcasting, to be studied, as well as being able to relay information back. The reason why I bring that up is that we right now have expeditions literally in Antarctica for a lot of these reasons, to study and understand the atmosphere, to then take that same concept and then create a scientific base on the moon first, and then build commercialization around that makes the most sense. And it makes it clear, because then things like Irina talked about, and as we talk more about some of the other supply chain issues, then it makes sense, because you're building up a scientific community that does need DLT to track items, be able to keep and catalog scientific experiments. What we have yet to do is really create a full-blown use case. We know we want to be in space, but without a use case that allows us to build an infrastructure, the same reason why California was built. People came because of gold. The gold rush, 1849, it's always been a resource grab. First, there were people who are coming in to build the infrastructure, the ones who are in desire of whatever that resource is, and then the commercialization of that location based on building around that mining town. We saw an explosion most recently in South Dakota. I mean, this is how human operation functions. There's no oil, but then all of a sudden they discovered that you can do sideways drilling, you can find other ways. And now in South Dakota, it costs almost $1 million to buy a property, when before you could have bought something for $40,000. It's first focusing on the practical applications of what space can offer, and then finding a close location. And I'm really liking the idea of building scientific centers first on the moon, and then utilizing all that technology to feed it, and then growing out commercialization. So I think the sensationalism, and then, and we love Tesla, you can't talk about space without Elon Musk, to be honest. But the commercialization of space can't precede the scientific need for creating a resource-rich environment that comes back to the Earth, that then will create a true commercial enterprise.
Well, and hopefully we don't have every, terrifying science fiction movie happen at once, and all of a sudden Alien takes place, and that one little piece of rock we brought back, that one mineral, all of a sudden, has alien popping out of us. But all jokes aside, I think you're spot on, and I've read it as well. A number of subjects and articles around the future of mining and the power of mining, even just a minute asteroid that's coming across, right? Slow but fast moving, and how we can mine some of the basic materials we have here on Earth that we're a little shy of, and even looking at gold and some of these other materials as well that make up our cell phones, which people forget how many rare earth materials. So I'll just add, the thing that a lot of those articles talk about is how rare earth materials. So there's a small number of what is called rare earth materials. These are rare earth-based materials currently that help make up the electronics that power our lives today. And they help power the semiconductors, they help the microprocessors. I mean, I'm not buzzwording here, I'm being honest with you. So take a look at that. And the thing is there's only a finite amount of these, and we have yet to be able to recreate those. So once they're gone, they're gone. But there has been some studies done that we could go and mine, realistically go mine asteroids or comets and things coming across, or even the moon, to grab the enrichment from those. So I think you're spot on that. And Noble, I had a second, and then Irene, and then Wally and Gary, get ready because we're coming to you.
No, I just wanted to just throw in one of the things that you just brought up. It's not just rare earth metals; it's rare gases. We have a finite amount of helium on this planet that runs CAT scan machines. It runs a significant number of just technology, and one of the issues is that we're in depletion. And the fact is, I think that depending on who you say, what research you look at, right? We're 70 years from depleting our entire helium source. It's not like it's some kind of long magnanimous time. And so without helium, it's kind of something we've taken for granted, that there's something that's lighter than air that's on the earth. But these are the things that we have to kind of, again, just to your point, look at as we start looking at resource grabs that are existent and abundant in the universe but are not here. And one of the biggest pushes that we personally do is we just don't buy helium balloons just for that reason. I don't think it helps, but it's one of the issues that we have to be cognizant of, that we can't just continue to burn resources. And there's a lot of resources, like you said, that we just kind of take for granted, like it's water or just air, and it's not. So it's something to keep in mind.
Irina, you had a point.
I wanted to add that when people think about asteroid mining, they think that it's a science fiction often, but there are a number of countries that already have policy laid out for what it looks like and what the guidelines are. And founder of Space Fund, Rick Tomlinson, have been a leading expert and advisor to US government and other governments as well, advising exactly on that. So there are a number of countries in the world right now that already have legislation that describes what this asteroid mining would look like. And there are a lot of countries that are in the process of figuring that out too. So it's much closer than we think.
Which is exciting, and also, exciting to see science fiction come to reality, but a little terrifying, and also a little bit, open questions. And that's what I mean by a little worrisome, is there's so much that goes into a business of that nature, right? And that industry itself. But let's hold there. Gary, I want to come to you. I mean, we've talked a lot about space, but you're the guru of artificial intelligence. Where is kind of the current state of AI as a deep technology applied kind of throughout these areas and other industries that we've spoken about?
Yeah, sure.
Forward.
Let me
Wally, we're coming to you next, so get ready.
Let me paint a little picture, Kyle. Let's just think about this. This is recent data from 2013. By the way, I just wrote an article in Forbes about the road to Mars, AI and the road to Mars. So it's not published yet, it's just coming out. But let me tell you something incredible. There are 40 billion, estimated by the Kepler project, 40 billion Earth-like planets just in the Milky Way galaxy. To put an Earth-like, that means close enough to a sun they could have life like Earth. And not a lot of people know this, but there are 100 billion galaxies. So 40 billion Earth-like planets in just our galaxy, and there are 100 based on the Hubble telescope, right? So let's say it's just a portion of that. There's a lot out there. Now, let's take another challenge. From the year 1800 to today, the population of the world went from 1 billion to 7.8 billion. In the last 100 years, the population of the Earth has quadrupled. What's going to happen in another 200 or 300 years? Where are we all going to live? What is going to happen to all the resources? So when we look at space as a frontier, this is the time for us to get out. So you talked about AI. I mean, AI, we talked about yesterday about my friend David Yang and partners house Morpheus. But let me tell you, that technology today is being used. So it's called Seaman. So the Crew Interactive Mobile Companion. And it was developed by the European Space Agency, directly used to help astronauts and cosmonauts better adjust psychologically and physically to space. It's a 3D printed robot. So these technologies today are there. So take the same smart assistants that we have, Alexa, Siri, expand them, talk about the house that we talked about yesterday, Morpheus. This is today. So the satellites, the data. So Noble was talking about asteroids and that kind of thing. So imagine the satellites. So there's a couple, what an Invasat is one, for instance, SkySat. Those satellites are out there using artificial intelligence, recently deployed with up to 150 terabytes of data in a day, looking to see what's going to happen in space, looking to see what's out there that's going to come in. So that tomorrow is today. So what we have is a phenomenal opportunity for artificial intelligence, because that data is streaming at us in such an incredible way that we've got to make sense of it. There are dangers to our planets. And by the way, there are, we don't know what's out there, right? We're just beginning. We're an infant. We're not even a toddler. We don't have a clue what's going to be out there. Are there other folks out there? Are there other beings out there? Where are these planets? Who knows? But the closest planet is 12 light years away. That's Proxima Centauri. We have a great opportunity as explorers to not think about just mining, but think about this universe. Think about the galaxy. Let's explore it. Let's figure out how to be able to travel differently, beyond traveling at the speed of light, because we wouldn't get there. How do we travel differently for a wormhole, as Stephen Hawking said, et cetera? So I think AI is going to help us as an assistant. It's going to help us process massive amounts of data, and it's going to help us be able to live our lives better and to get out. Because another 200 or 300 years, think about it. It quadrupled in the last 100 years to 8 billion. So now if it quadruples again and it quadruples again, where are we going to be? Where are those resources? Forget about MRIs. I'm going to be thinking about how much we're going to be able to breathe, right? How much oxygen? What's going to happen to the ozone? Those kind of things. So we need to figure out where we could live in another 500 years. Are we going to really be able to live here? I don't think so, right? We're going to have to.
And you're bringing up, and you're bringing up great points. And I like to always think about science fiction and bringing science fiction to life, because sometimes science fiction at its surface can be a little terrifying, and it can paint a very bleak or dark picture, but truly it can actually open your eyes to the future of innovation and the future of where we may be going. And one thing you touched on is the idea of smart assistants and how that will play a role into even just the changing of travel. And the first thing that came to my mind was a science fiction movie, Solo, for my Star Wars fans out there, and how artificial intelligence played a role in the advancement of the Millennium Falcon. Yes, I'm nerding out, I apologize, but there's a point. And before that AI was implemented into the ship, travel at a light speed was not possible. And that actually changed. Again, I understand it's science fiction, people, but do hear me out here. It changed the way that they looked at travel. And to us, these technologies, the deeper technologies that, again, do not face the end users, they actually empower and act as an infrastructure, these are changing the way that we think and do things. And we're about to get to quantum computing and to talk about edge, because that's another level up of this, right? We bring blockchain in this, we bring space travel, we bring satellites, we bring AI to empower and leverage that data. Now, Wally, I'm coming to you, talking about bio, talking about, advanced materials, talking about edge and the future of connectivity. Where are we with these current states? Because this plays a role. I mean, Irina's talking about us making payments in space, which is necessary, but also just in general, I mean, how does the future of connectivity look as we go to the edge, not just here on Earth, but maybe even further than that? So where are the current states in your mind?
Yeah. Thanks. I really like the discussion. I think we talking a lot about pushing our limits to the further, basically going much further and further. But to the other extreme, we can go to tiny and tiny. So I think the whole bio and medtech innovations in the past decade is to really drill down to the basically the DNA level. So that is actually a big advance, basically a breakthrough over the past 10 years, especially those technologies like CRISPR, where people can edit the DNA at their will. So I think there's a couple of interesting already application level of those breakthroughs in biotechnologies and material technologies. One is that I actually see some startups that are using DNA to store the information. So they basically combine the biology with the information technology, and using the ATGC to store our basically the information, the bits. And they are still in the early stage, but attracts quite a bit of the capital. There's a few companies doing that. I think in the coming years, we will see some initial product that launch that you can use just a finger-sized packed DNA to store a library, for example. So those are actually what I think is actually the world is shrinking because of our basically we can analyze and also process the DNA level of data. So that is actually a very interesting. And the second aspect is that once we knows more about our whole genomes, we can actually basically analyze the whole the whole nature at a much larger scale. So before, a lot of the disease that we cannot treat, and also the talking about those chronic disease and also cancers, we have a much better understanding over the past 5 years. And I've one of my thesis or areas of focus is using the AI or using more data analytics tools combined with those basically what we call the multi-omics data that can actually better diagnose those disease and also finding the better therapeutics. So what I think is really we talk about this in the coming years in this whole diagnosis and treatment stage, we can actually see a lot of the advance, especially under this COVID. We already see the new mRNA type of vaccine is developing at a much faster speed than the traditional vaccine development process. So in the past decade, we talk about that software is eating the world, and people are talking about the cloud is eating software. I think right now we are seeing the same thing. It's actually happening in the biotech and medtech, where software or data or artificial intelligence is eating the whole biotech space. So that's what I think is actually very exciting. And also beyond that, I also look very deeply into in general, the travel, but more on the earth. So we talk about those autonomous vehicle or autonomous trucks, and also robotics and deliveries. I think that's actually happening in the next few years. I mean, Waymo, those are like already a hype in the past 5 years. But with the current recent, for example, the Amazon's acquisition of Zoox, we actually see a couple of scenarios that are actually having some more promising to see the real applications or real. I'm actually pretty promising in, especially in those autonomous delivery scenarios. So right now here in Mountain View, I already see some robotics that are doing those in the downtown Mountain View area that sometimes block the traffic, but we are seeing this are actually happening a true autonomous, meaning no safety guy in the car or in the vehicle. And I'm thinking that I'm also focusing quite a bit on the development of the sensors over the past several years. So we can actually see the hardware is actually accelerating that true autonomy happening, especially the reduce of the size and the cost of the LiDAR, and increase the basically the accuracy of the cameras, combined with the new AI algorithms that those talent teams are developing. So I'm actually seeing that is also happening quite in a short term.
Yeah, and this is, this plays into the next kind of question I want to bring all of to you guys is, we've talked about all these technologies. They sound amazing and very exciting, but there's challenges that come with each of these, right? Autonomous vehicles we've been talking about for years, but we're just now getting there. Was it technology or were there other roadblocks? No pun intended. Biotech, the same thing. Blockchain, AI, space, all of these, again, very exciting industries, but what are some of the challenges that you're seeing, founders experience or investors experience when looking at these industries? Because we do want to solve those, right? We want people to understand the risks and the opportunities. So what are some of the challenges you're seeing to these industries really being able to advance quicker? And Wally, I want to start back with you on biotech and also just autonomous and again, edge as a whole. Where are you seeing those challenges exist for people who may be building in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a $1 billion question. So those are like, there's I normally see as an investor, we need to basically analyze all those risks and trying to understand which risks are we can solve in the short term, which are like long-term risks or very hard to break. So if I talk about in the biotech space, I think right now the major challenge is that we have so much incumbents in the industry. So all those pharma companies, they're too big to fail. I mean, that's the reality. So it's very hard for a technology disruptor to really challenge the whole industry. So a lot of the time you see basically the big farmers, they have their own, for example, they have their own pipeline and they have their own value chain. And it's very hard to kind of like embrace or give up their existing, for example, the drug development process to embrace the new drug development process, even though in the academic or in the more startup world, people are already talking a lot about using, like, for example, using GAN, generative adversary network, to create those new molecular, but it's very hard for the big pharma to adapt that. So it really is about how can we change the whole value chain. So I look at the startup or the entrepreneur finding a very unique value proposition to, at one hand, at one aspect to collaborate with the farmers, at the other hand, also having their own pipeline and become a big farmer themselves. So that's, I think it's quite challenging. In the autonomous vehicle, I think it's also pretty much similar. So we talk about those, I think that's a topic for the past 5 years. People talk about those big OEMs and also big tier ones in the basically automobile industry. And those are also incumbents, very hard to challenge. But what I think is right now, after a few years of kind of fighting, or all the autonomous vehicles raise hundreds of millions, I mean, entrepreneurs are already finding their way to try to monetize or try to be capital efficient to bring to the market their end product, bypassing those incumbents. So that's what I think is very, very promising. So I think that's especially in those, for example, delivery, where a lot of new economy, those are the early adopters, like those, we talk about the Uber, we talk about those Amazon, they're quite tech driven and innovative. So I think that is more promising. Yeah, in general, I think for the entrepreneurs to disrupt such a great industry by a disruptive technology always is about the how to find a unique proposition to challenge those incumbents.
Absolutely. And Noble, to you, same thing in space. I mean, what's kind of holding you, or what do you see as some of the challenges for companies to really be successful and start thriving in that space?
Well, while you brought up, before you jump to space, I think it really is what's happening here on Earth that makes all the challenges, right? So we look at CRISPRs, and this is something that I've been tracking for quite some time. We look at, there's no way not to talk about space and the future and current technology without looking at science fiction as kind of our moral and ethical ability to see what could happen, right? So Asimov, Bradbury, all these guys were already futurists, far ahead of their times in what they imagine. Ray Bradbury, what they imagine the next world would look like. And we've been trying very hard to utilize a lot of those stories to drive ourselves and our technology in a way that's both ethical and moral. But some of the things don't necessarily translate, right? So you had Asimov's, 3 laws of robots. These things, harm no one, humans before all. These are things that we are trying to figure out a way to implement with human fallibility. CRISPR's is a byproduct of a lot of the cloning experiments that have been banned long before with Dolly the sheep and the like. I think part of the fact that we do not have a true international governing body of science and technology that is devoid of politics actually holds us as a species back, because everyone is highly tribal on things that are both scientific and have the benefit or the ability to benefit humanity as a whole, but because of politics, tribalism, political lines, even within their own countries, we have found ourselves hamstrung by the human fallibilities of both jealousy, secrecy, and the need to basically be first to make a profit. Ray Bradbury, or let's look at Gene Roddenberry, the only reason why Star Trek exists is that it is, and nobody really pays attention to it, but it's truly a global militarized mission of a planet that has decided to go to space as one unity and create and take the best of the best and go and explore. We have yet to even be able to handle our own internal politics countryside. And so it becomes a very difficult way to navigate when you have layers upon layers of both rules, regulations, and no real focus either on the scientific method and a need in order to drive the health of humanity as a whole. So a lot of the technologies, whether they are biological, because the minutiae is very, is very key. We can't go to space without doing some significant bioengineering for human beings. We're just too fragile creatures to be in space. There's the various multiple forms of radiation, etc. We look at anime, which is another great futurist. They have a whole cartoons or animes based on human beings who are able to process solar energy, because our mitochondrial DNA is not too much different from plants, and utilizing even a fraction of our ability to change us to modify solar energy would allow us to not have to be able to be in space. So there's these things that we know futuristically wise that we can experiment and test with, but unfortunately, because we don't have a global mandate, and because we don't have and we're all afraid of each other here, I think that a lot of technology becomes very difficult, not only for space, but even domestically. We could have had autonomous vehicles. Let's go with the most basic of technologies that people ignored. We could have had electrical vehicles 100 years ago. This has been was a whole line of technology that was stymied and killed by both the petrol industry and the rubber industry. And yet it took us almost 100 years to finally get to lithium-ion batteries, and now they're working on carbon-ion batteries, which are phenomenal, which have lesser time. And these are things that we know, but have so much entrenchment in both the current system as well as us having a deep distrust in one another. So I think that, you know, what holds us back as a species is the same thing that propels us forward. You know, we're naturally adventurers and explorers, and we want to drive forward. But I think that unless we come up with some form of a separate entity or a global body, a full unifying ability to get out to space will always be these patchwork models that are popping up. And I think we're bit by bit getting better, so there's no doomsday in that conversation, but it makes it very difficult for one to wrap their heads around us being global. And I think, which is interesting, this pandemic has kind of started having these global conversations because people are interacting from Russia and Asia and America. And, you know, we're sitting on this screen, and, you know, I've been on a couple other of these events, and, you know, 12 and 8 and 9 different countries and nations are all interacting simultaneously. And we haven't yet, you know, this was science fiction, right? Nobody, you know, had ever done that before. And so now,
oh, now we're here. I mean, we're now here, which is exciting, but I want to make sure. So I apologize. I have to interrupt because we're coming close to time. So I want to make sure Irina and Gary get a chance to get in here as well. But you're making an absolute point. Science fiction, once written, once thought, only imagined. Now it's finally here. And we're missing that governing body, that regulatory on a global scale to help each other really power through this. And I think we're getting there in terms of collaboration, right? There's more happening today than ever. And Irina, I want to come to you around both space, but also blockchain as well. I mean, what's some of the challenges you're seeing in deep technology that we really need to overcome as founders and investors to push these things forward?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenges really come in from the lack of funding. And that lack of funding goes across the border. When we think about science, when we think about bioscience, when we think about redefining the way we travel, it all comes down to kind of a career suicide. Okay, so if you're a scientist and you go against mainstream media, it is very challenging to get continuous funding. So you have to have a very heavy wealth behind you to be able to do that. To get published your work, it's nearly impossible. And I think that's one of the things that we can do as investors, that funds can do too, is really open up their minds to the bottlenecks of innovation. I think that our science is reached to a point to where we cannot go and do things that we want to do based on old science. We live under assumption that we know everything there is, right? So, and this is very unpopular thing to say, but for example, gravity. Nobody challenges the gravity. And it must be challenged because all the innovation always comes from challenging outdated old knowledge. And that's where we live now. We live in outdated old knowledge. However, we have a lot of brilliant scientists that are working and that are starving. And so I think that the biggest bottleneck is the funding. And if we can provide funding to these projects all across the border, from space to bio to whatever it is, we'll be able to reach further to the skies, to the stars, literally and figuratively.
Absolutely agree. And Gary, I mean, look, you've told me so much about this home. I want this home so bad. And this smart assistant, like now. What are some of the challenges? Why don't we have
I take an entirely different viewpoint than Irina. So in 2002, Elon Musk was doing Tesla, got out of PayPal, and started SpaceX, and people laughed. And look what he's been able to do in that period of time. So I believe it's not all about the funding. It's about having a vision and getting people to buy off on it. Look at it today. I mean, SpaceX is the #1 transporter of satellites in the world, and they started from scratch. So I think there's a great opportunity, and it's about finding that and thinking differently, using some of the technologies like we talked about the house yesterday. Those kind of smart assistants are the same kind of assistants that are going to be needed to be able to go to space. So adapt them. Velcro was made by the Russians. Not a lot of people know that for space, and now people take it for granted, right? Use the technology that we have and enhance it, adapt it for space. So I'm not sure all that funding needs to take place, but showing there's an opportunity. This is something we have to do, and we've got to do it sooner or later. And we've got time, but not a lot of it to do it. I think it's great in terms of mining minerals, rare earth. It's great, but I'm concerned about where we're going to be as a civilization in another couple hundred years. So I think the opportunities today, I think in terms of using existing technologies to go forward is great. I think using artificial intelligence to be able to help us get those answers is phenomenal.
And I think Irina has a point.
So that's really great that there are some privileged people that are in single numbers that are able to go and do the things that they've done. However, for us to be able to really implement the innovation, we need to be able to do it across the border. And for the most part, when those innovators, when those people that think outside of box, when they go and they talk to the funds, they do not get a penny. It's not only about the vision, but it really is in the end of the day about the funding. Elon Musk is special. Elon Musk has a lot of good friends. What he's doing is amazing. But we need a global society of people. We need entrepreneurs to be able to go and be able to think outside of box. Biotechnology is extremely challenging to raise funding for. If you are a scientist and you are going against mainstream adoption, against mainstream rules, for the most part, you're canceled. And if we live in a society where you're canceled because you're speaking out outside of the box and because your innovation does not go with mainstream media, and if we do not provide those people with funding, we're going to be dependent on a single number of people who are only visionaries. We need to be able to fund this.
Irina, I think you got a great point, but I got to tell you, I think differently. And I'm from Silicon Valley, right? So the Steve Jobs of the world, the David Yangs of the world. I mean, those people have done it. They've started from nothing. They've done it. They've got consensus. There are ways to do it. And part of it is having a network, just like we are in this show, to be able to get the word out. So I think if we entitle people and we take that kind of path, nothing good's going to happen. When we went up to space and the space race happened, look what happened in 10 years, right? We put somebody on the moon. So part of it is, creating a sense of urgency and adapting technologies that we have. And I think if we start entitling it, nothing but, we're going to have a fat society. I don't agree with you on that side. And I think that's why the beauty of Silicon Valley and the innovations that have come out of there are really, really helpful. And I believe anybody can do it with the vision, right?
Let's use cancer research.
Hold on. Because if I let this continue, all three of you, and poor Wally and I are gonna be quiet. All three of you will talk over each other. So here's what I'm hearing. Let me try to summarize real quick. There is a need for capital, right? First off, there's a need for vision. Let's be clear. There is a need for vision. Whether you're the Elons, the Steve Jobs, the who's who, there is a need for a vision to reach for the stars, all puns intended on our topic today. There is a need for a vision. There is need for an ecosystem of any kind of support, right? We've talked about it on previous episodes of what ecosystems include: governments, to investors, to entrepreneurs, to resources, to universities, to capital markets, and beyond. There needs to be pieces, if not the whole ecosystem, to support you. 3, there needs to be capital, and not just $10. There needs to be hundreds, thousands, tens of millions and plus of dollars. There needs to be capital to support you. And not just investment capital, because that's not what building a business is about. To Gary's point as well, there needs to be revenue. There needs to be a business as well. There needs to be a use case that you're solving for. And then there needs to be buy-in. You know, the reason we were able to go to the moon in 10 years and do some of the amazing things we were is that there was a bigger picture buy-in. And I think everyone's making that same point. And Gary, I don't mean to take away. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's why the Valley is the Valley in Silicon Valley, is because there is those pieces. There is the buy-in that this is the place to come, or was. We'll leave it at that. This was the place to come to build anything in terms of advancement and innovation and technology. But now, as we look at, to your point of globalization and us advancing as a society, because I agree, and there's some deep, philosophy in there of where we go, and I'll let us unpack that on a one-on-one episode. But nonetheless, we need that bigger buy-in. As a society, we need, as either consumers or as enterprises or technologists, that we want to see our genomics. We want to see biotechnology advance, right? We want artificial intelligence a part of our lives. We want trust. We want transparency. We want to go somewhere new. So to summarize all of this, it sounds like each of you are calling out very strongly, and I will leave it at that because I respect all of that opinion, very strongly, that we need these ecosystem pieces. Whether it's in a whole or one, at the end of the day, we need it all. And so whether it's space, whether it's AI, whether it's bio, whatever, we need those ecosystems to exist, because without them, this shit doesn't work. And I apologize again for using that word, but it doesn't work, right? You can't just have funding, to your point, and everything be perfect. You can't just have visionaries without resources and support. You can't have any of this without buy-in at any level. You can't have big monopolies running and owning an industry without allowing for innovation at a smaller scale. So I think every single person, you guys are all spelling out the biggest problem here is the lack of a true ecosystem, a full ecosystem to support all of these areas, but it's coming. I mean, AI, I don't mean to take this from the audience or from the panel, but AI, we know that ecosystem's there. We know it's coming. With blockchain, we'll just leave it at that. There's something there. When it comes to bio, there's still some work. When it comes to space, Gary mentioned that we're in the baby steps. We're in the early days when it comes to the bigger industry of space and that ecosystem coming together. But Irina and her team and groups that she and Noble are working with, they're bringing this together. So to the audience, our investors and our entrepreneurs, ecosystem, be there and supportive, whether that's buying into the big vision of Elon and others, whether that's funding these projects, whether that's providing education like we do, to Gary's point again, on talking about these things, be a part of the ecosystem, be involved. If you're not involved, you can't complain that something's not happening, right? If we're not going to space and you're complaining about how we're not going to space, guess what? Are you doing anything to solve the problem? If not, no. If you are, join us on VCTV to join the argument and the discussion. But I'm going to pause there and I'm going to go to the kind of next question because I think it's relevant is, where are the areas of opportunity? Where, if you're thinking about investing in artificial intelligence, you're investing in bio, you're investing in edge, you're investing in space, you're investing in these, where's the opportunity? Where should we as investors be looking at that's not yet talked about in these areas as opportunities? So Gary, I'm going to come back to you because I interrupted all three of you. Poor Wally sitting over there just listening to all of this. First timer, Wally, don't get scared. This is a good conversation. These are all good points.
It is. Very good.
Gary, I want to come to you. Where should we be looking at as areas of opportunity in this space?
I mean, what we do is we go to places that have incredible scientific talent, places like Israel, places like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, that have incredible talent, incredible math and science capabilities, and to be able to work with those types of individuals, whether they be professors or students or entrepreneurs, and to be able to help them commercialize their activity, to be able to create it, to package it. As you said, you do need an ecosystem. So if we find the raw material, what we want to do is be able to mold it, to be able to turn it into something incredible. And I think that we haven't done enough of that as a society. And I don't mean just there, whether it's in China, whether it's in Malaysia, whether it's in California, it doesn't matter, wherever that talent is, but be able to bring it together. So it's critically important for conversations just like this to bring people together. I mean, that's what we do with GSD. We look at those kind of companies to be able to pack it to make something that's incredible, will solve these kind of problems. And that involves getting capital, that involves helping them package it in terms of operations, the whole 9 yards. So it is critically important to package it, to get it ready for the market, to at least test it.
Absolutely. And that I couldn't agree more. And again, if you're looking at building an artificial intelligence, you're not talking to Gary, you're doing yourself a disservice. Get with that gentleman. All right, Noble, to you, where are the opportunities in space? I mean, you painted in fintech and AR, VR, so augmented and virtual reality. I mean, you painted a very exciting picture about us going in a holographic way. So where are the opportunities as investors?
So for me, I'm knee deep. You know, I have a patent on augmented reality and the intersection of that and product items. And so with that being said, I'm 100% bought into the idea that extended reality and digital science is really where people should invest. I believe that interstellar travel is capable, but to Wally's point, it becomes very difficult to start looking at a macro way without looking at multi-generational opportunities there. Of course, we want to save the planet and we want to use the technology we have to get to space. But in lieu of that, we still need explorers. And I really believe things such as Oculus and Magic Leap and where that component is going makes it accessible. And, an Avatar really showed us what that means. When you have the ability to 3D print a robot, then you can send 3D printed robots all across the universe and then, literally inhabit them virtually to explore becomes a huge intersection of two technologies. So I really am a big fan of everything the panel's talked about, but for us specifically, the focus is always going to be on augmented reality and extended reality and how we intersect technology, digital technology, with how we intersect with the world.
I love it. Wally, where are the opportunities that lie here?
Yeah. So I mean, from an investor perspective, there's full of opportunities. That's the reason why we are doing our job. Basically, we see a lot of big opportunities, small opportunities. So I think in general, I can echo back by what I was talking about the bio space. In the bio space, I think, as I mentioned, using multi-omics, meaning like not just your DNA data, but also your RNAs and your MRIs, your everything, to doing a personalized treatment and also diagnostic. That's what I think. It's definitely tons of opportunities there. And one small area that I also found very exciting is in the microbiomes, basically microbiomes, DNA and RNAs. That's also a new type of diagnostic and treatment will happens because people understand about their own genomes, but not their environment. And so in the edge space that I've invested in recently, a company, Kyle, EdgeWorks, and I think I focus very much on, I think for the entrepreneurs to focus on delivering an end-to-end solution in any verticals that you think the edge computing or the AI can disrupt. So there's tons. For example, in hospitals, in schools, in public sectors, there's many areas leveraging AI to push on the edge, to doing like a smart camera, et cetera, et cetera. There's many opportunities there that I see, especially under this COVID. A tons of the customer experience and the real world experience will be slightly like twisted towards in the next few years because of this basically the whole environment change. So that's what I think is also very exciting.
Marina.
Yes. Well, let's talk about space first, since I think that's the kind of the more innovation topic. the beauty of space now is that we have a really diverse community of companies that are available right now. A lot of them are already in revenue. And just to your point that, there's an innovation to things that we're looking forward to the future. And then there are really companies that's been around for 10 years now. We've had space as a free enterprise for a little bit over 10 years. And we now finally see the seeds that were planted 10 years ago kind of be sprouting out. When I think about space, I think about transportation, and transportation, not just how to get from here, because we kind of have that solved, and in an innovation sort of way as well, but also communication. We need to think about the communication. As we are reaching further, we need to think about, how do we stay in contact with our planet? We need to think about human factor, habitats, life support, biomedical. To Wally's point, in order for us to be able to go further and explore all the habitats that Gary mentioned, we really need to think about how do we adopt and how do we change our biology and support our biology. Robotics is very, very important. Supply chain is very necessary. When we think about a supply chain, we think about raw materials and mining. Just to be able to travel further than we can right now, we need to be able to mine and produce outside of our planet, right? We need to think about, that means that we need to think of manufacturing and production. And of course, energy. We need to be able to capture and create energy and really understand kind of what different new sources of energy that we can have. The beauty is that it's all available now. There are companies all over the world that are actually building solutions for that. If you go to spacefund.com and you scroll down, you will see space rating. And you will be able to see all the categories that are basically available, and you will see companies in which you can invest. And I would love and encourage investors to vote with their dollars, not just for the large companies that require billions and billions of dollars, but a medium stage companies. A B round fundraising is very important, and it really does not exist. There's no VCs that deploy in a BC round of the space companies. So on spacefund.com, you can see references, you can see the companies, and most importantly, you can see the categories that are needed in order to be able to create the ecosystem. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can actually see, this is needed and there's not much competition in this, so maybe I will start this company. And luckily, there are early stage VCs that already exist. When we think about blockchain, I believe that the most innovation that we must see and we will see and we're seeing right now is in implementation of capital markets. Our capital market systems are outdated. Everything is built on old systems. Everything goes back to when we used to use papers for everything, right? We no longer need to use papers for things. We can save the trees and forego all the papers. So that's where blockchain technology comes in. It allows us to kind of really connect the world, capital markets world. Right now we live, to your point, Kyle, we live in segregated worlds. And a blockchain technology in a lot of ways allows us to be able to eliminate the borders and create truly global wealth transfer, right? Connecting funding and connecting projects from all over the world is one of the biggest things that I am inspired of doing. I think that there are so many innovators all over the world that deserve the voice. They deserve the ability to be able to make their visions a reality. And right now they don't have it because of outdated systems.
And we're going to get there.
Yes.
we're working together. The ecosystems are coming. Gary's going to power this all, so it's going to be perfect. I can't wait. But with that being said, all jokes aside, but serious, he is going to power this all. We're at the lightning round, so we've got 2 fun questions that I want to bring to the panel that I think are exciting to kind of spark this conversation. So quick answers for our audience, and then we'll get to closing thoughts and where everyone can find us. But first and foremost, we'll come around to everybody. Quantum. Are we ready to go quantum? Is this something that's real? Is this really going to change our life? Or is this a bunch of science fiction on paper and not yet really here? So quick answers. I know that's a little not fair based on the big topic at hand, but would love to hear each of your quick few second answer of, are we ready to go quantum yet? So Noble, let's start with you. Are we ready to go quantum? You're on mute, my friend.
Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't hit the mute button, but yeah, absolutely, 100%. Ohm's law dictates that quantum is what's going to happen, and we need faster, cooler computers and computing power to solve all of these things to do the computation. So I'm 100% behind quantum computing. Period.
I love it, Wally. I see you shaking your head ever since I asked that question.
I forgot to mention quantum, but basically in the bio space that I'm tracking, quantum computing the core bit is very good to analyze basically the structural, to digest the structural information and produce a synthetic biology, recipes in short. We can actually produce new type of basically new type of treatments. So that's what I think it's something that we are hoping, haven't seen, but for sure, if there's quantum applications, for sure the bio space would love to see.
There you go, building bio quantum. There's your guy. Irina, are we ready to go quantum?
Absolutely. We're so ready, and we're seeing a lot of innovation all over. One of the great projects that I'm really passionate about, its name is Supernature, and it's based on actually defying the whole pieces of gravity. And they've done amazing work in the lab. It's amazing to see their little machine being able to multidimensionally move. And really, when I think about that, it allows us to be able to go and travel, so, and there are many other projects. We're getting closer than ever. And most importantly, the development of quantum allows us to be able to think outside of box. So it's not just applicable to technology, but to mindset, because when we think about quantum, we think of all the opportunities, we think of all the possibilities. And when people hear about it, they're allowing their mind expand. And to me, that's the kind of the most important thing.
Absolutely agree. I'm reading a book about quantum right now, and it's blowing my mind page by page. So I'm with you. Yeah. Gary, are we ready to go quantum? You're on mute, my friend.
In terms of artificial intelligence, quantum computers are natural. So, if we look at Sycamore that Google developed, we're in a stage now with all this massive amount of information, as I've said many times around us, we have to be able to synthesize it. So any way we can do that in a timely fashion. Now, on one side, in 2019, folks would say that one of the quantum computer scientists said he wasn't really sure if it's cracked up to what it's supposed to be. So remains to be seen, but we do need something that's massive that can synthesize this incredible amount of data around us.
Awesome. Last question, quick answer.
Yep.
Prediction for the year we'll hit singularity.
Well, we're already started down that path, aren't we? It's not going to be 1 year. It's going to be it's going to be very, very gradual. And so we're going to see things, nanobots, we're going to see all kinds of things happen around us, and it's going to be incremental. So you won't really know it's happened until it's really over. And they'll say, oh, I remember that. So it's happening now.
There you go. Irina.
I agree 100%, and we're moving, and we're incrementally moving, and I believe we're speeding up faster and faster and faster. All the kind of innovations are now coming in together. We used to live in a world where we had one innovation, and there was a long time period, right, between them. And then those periods started speeding up. And now when we look at it, look at all of us. We could discover, there's so many of them, and they're all coming in together, and they're interdependent on each other. So we're living through it, and it's our journey, just like Gary said, to be able to take those incremental steps and continue on forward. And one day we're going to be like, oh yeah, we're there.
Noble.
Yeah, right now, I don't know if anybody's read the Posthuman Series by David Simpson. It's pretty phenomenal. It's a sci-fi series, which is really delving deep into what the potentiality of this singularity looks like. And the reality is, we're here. I'd be honest, we're here, right? That people don't. There's nobody on this planet that goes almost anywhere who's in an industrialized world without a smartphone. And so the next level of that is to incorporate that within us. And then the next phase of that is to integrate that with AI. Because that's the only way we'll be able to let the wetware be able to communicate with the hardware. So we are at, when people look back and they see how the smartphone was the extension of the human body, to be frank, that will be the point of where they can point to and say singularity started. So we're here. I mean, we can't go anywhere without technology. We can't function without technology. And this is the scary part of all that is that's when the digital divide becomes far, far more worse, because 50% of the planet still doesn't have running water. So
that's when that's when the
really
robots rise.
No,
that's when the robots rise.
No, it's just
Gary's the only one that can protect us.
No, it's
Gary's the only one that can. Yeah, Gary's the only one that can protect us.
Morpheus will protect us.
Morpheus, we're all going to Morpheus. If you don't know what that is, get ready. Wally, to you,
Cool.
When's the singularity?
I don't have an answer, but I think what I could do, or what we hope to do, is that we can live as long as we can actually see that or achieve that, which I think it's actually possible given the advancement in the therapeutics. So cure those disease and also those chronic disease and those cancers. So what I think is that we can live a good and happy life and a longer life, so that we are good to see those no matter when that will happen.
Wonderful. All right, everybody, time for closing thoughts. And where can everyone find you? Wally, we'll come back to you and we'll come around. So Wally, at this point of the show, closing thoughts, anything you have left to add quickly, and then also where can everyone find you online so they can connect afterwards, as I feel our audience, based on everything I'm seeing, is very interested to talk to each of us afterwards.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and also just by I have also my Twitter, so it's pretty straightforward to find me, and love to discuss more interesting topics. And I'm actually covering from the early stage, but I also invest in pretty late stage as well, like pre-IPO companies. So I see basically every stage that I see deals. So love to share more with other investors or with fellow entrepreneurs. Yeah, I think it's definitely a great discussion. It's a great honor to discuss with all the futuristic, those new innovations. As an investor, most of my daytime is more boring, kind of like I'm focusing more on whether the team or the company that are pitching to me can actually achieve that thing. So most of my time is so narrowly minded to those validating those business opportunities. But I really enjoy the discussion during this past an hour to talk about all those future things that are, fine to definitely great chat. Thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're absolutely excited that you were able to join us today, and we're looking forward to having you back to talk about Edge and IoT here in a few weeks. Noble, to you, quick closing thoughts, because we're already over time, and then where can everyone find you?
No, the quick closing thoughts is I think that people feel so grounded by what's happening with COVID-19 that it's very difficult to imagine what things look past this. And so I think I love the platform like this that gives us the opportunity to be the human parts of ourselves using imagination and being able to use our futurism to hope for a better tomorrow. So I appreciate being on here as always, and I think that as an investor and as people who bring in investors, that we should constantly keep our eyes literally to the stars at Astra, because that's really where human beings were meant to be.
Absolutely. And Irina.
Well, we're made out of stardust, so it makes sense that our destiny is to reach further to the stars. You can find me anywhere. My username everywhere is at Crypto Superwoman. I'm super active on basically everything. I don't know how I find time, but there's no time and space really. So that's kind of the theory that I live with, and it works for me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I would like to expand on Noble's point that through this challenging time when we stopped being able to travel and speak on big stages personally for me, and have to kind of stay back. I think that a lot of us have got grounded, and a lot of us realized how important our human connection is and how much of the same we are no matter where we live in the world. And I believe that people are moving toward more compassion, more understanding for each other, and most importantly, toward more connectivity with each other. And so my hope is that we keep on innovating and we keep on building, and that we build across the borders and work together, no matter what country we are, no matter where we are, no matter what languages we speak, and we keep going further into the stars, and we keep going deeper into ourselves, into literally ourselves, and innovate and explore and grow together.
Absolutely. And Gary, close us out.
Sure.
Closing thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also your article, plug it.
Yeah, so I'm publishing an article, the AI, the road to Mars. It's coming out in Forbes magazine probably next week. So one closing thought: stay positive. The glass is not half empty; the glass is half full. And if you believe that, it'll help you. No matter what you do in technology, it'll help you move forward. You can get me on LinkedIn, Gary Fowler, Gary at GSDVS. Which is Get Shit Done Venture Studios. So GSDVS.com is my company, and we help incredible AI companies take it to the next level. So if you want to go to Mars, give me a call.
There you go. Everyone, thank you so very much. If anything, I'm honored to have the chance to talk with each of you for the past hour and then some about not just what is science fiction, but what is reality, what is today, and looking to the stars and beyond, every bit of it. So thank you as well. And thank you to our audience for tuning in today. As everyone has said, we're all available online pretty much 24/7. You can reach out to all of us as investors and experts to talk about these things. Or if you've got a company, we'd love to hear about it. Also, if you liked what you heard today, make sure you click the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and we'll be back here tomorrow. But before we go, a big shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team who do such an amazing job bringing us together and helping to produce VCTV for you, our live audience. See you tomorrow as we talk about fundraising in this current era and for the next 6 to 12 months ahead. It's going to be another exciting episode. Continue to look to the stars, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody. I'm Kyle Lacotte. Bye-bye.